Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to be right back with today's guest, but I want to acknowledge our partners, Vital Signs Wall of Fame, the Global Community of Women in High School Sports, We Coach, and the Florida Coaches Coalition. Now, you've heard me say many times before, these are four great organizations. You should really add them to your network. And now, don't hit that fast forward button. I'm watching you. Stay with us for the next 3 minutes. We're going to give our sponsors a shout out. These are companies that I used as an athletic director. I think you should be using them too. Here we go. We want to say thanks to Gipper for their support. Gipper is the official social media graphics solution for us. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to help you create world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. It's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com. Start telling your school's story on social media. That's Gipper.com. We also want to thank Huddle for their support. Go to Huddle.com and change the way you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that helped them coach our kids up to their highest level. Go to Huddle.com, join the 8 million users, turn your school into a Huddle school. We'd also like to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. Go to their website and check out their interactive touchscreen video consoles. That's right, touchscreen video. It's a great way to showcase your school record boards for all the teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame, or simply showcase your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. Go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Mention the podcast. You'll get a nice discount. vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Home Campus. Go to homecampus.com. They're the exclusive high school and state association management platform for us. It's also your one-stop for things like scheduling, eligibility and clearance, uploading forms, connecting with parents, you name it. As a high school AD, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just great. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com, schedule a live web demo, and see their score tables and their score boards in action. Their products not only generate income for your department, they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. Make sure you check them out today. We want to thank Hometown Ticketing for their support. Hometown Ticketing is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more support, more security, more customization. hometownticketing.com. We want to say thanks to Snap Raise. Are you tired of spending hours and days and weeks with a fundraising program that gives you little, if any, return? Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school with great success. It works, okay? They also have a program where they will give you your money up front before you even start your fundraiser. Nobody else does that. Go to snapraise.com/EDAD. You're automatically signed up for a $1,500 drawing for your next SnapRaise fundraiser. That's snapraise.com. And we want to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, but they'll also connect you to the 98% that support your program. That's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Going out to California today, and we're talking with what I describe as an A-lister. Our guest is Kirsten Jones. Kirsten was an elite high school athlete, a Division I athlete, worked with Nike. We're going to hear about that, but She has taken her wisdom, taken her knowledge, and she's become a sport parenting coach. She's also a speaker on a national level. She has her own podcast, it's very popular, and she is the author of a book called Raising Empowered Athletes, a parent guide for raising happy, brave, and resilient kids. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see the books. I've got my own here. We are going to be talking about the book. But Kirsten Jones, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you, Jake. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we were connected through a mutual friend, and I think we've kind of been following each other at arm's length as you've been on this incredible national book tour. But we finally got you to sit down a little bit, and you're ours for about the next hour. So let's go and jump right in. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio: where you were born, where you grew up. Maybe take us up through your own high school and college years, which I know are stories in and of themselves. Then we'll take a break and hear more about your career. But what's the Kirsten Jones origin story?
Oh, yeah, it's just so fun to be here. And yeah, I've been traveling so much, but it's always fun to start with why you did something or where it started. And I grew up in Missoula, Montana, where my parents would joke the best thing about growing up in a rural place was you could be the athlete and be in the school play, and that halftime you could go play in the band because they needed the bodies, right? So no cut anything back then, and I think we did. All of us were raised in the 70s and 80s, and prior to that, you just played because it was fun. I played basketball and volleyball and soccer and tennis casually, and ran track and rode horses and snowmobiling and all of that. And every season was a new sport. And my parents focused on academics, and they said, you need to take piano and ballet. And if you would like to play some tennis, that's fine. But beyond that, we really could care less if you ever play a sport. And we skied as a family. And I gravitated toward ball sports, and I played a ton of basketball. In fact, I was a pretty good basketball player going into high school. And then my freshman year of high school, they introduced this other sport, volleyball. So you can only imagine the level of the volleyball that was being played in Montana when I got to high school. But we had so much fun. I was just excited to be doing something new and different because I'd kind of been doing basketball for so long. So I started to get recruited to play basketball locally in Montana, and then actually had the University of Montana offer me to play both basketball and volleyball. And I was ready for a change. I wanted to go and do something else. I got invited to go try out for the junior national team, and they were taking girls from all over the country. And so the guy said, you might have a shot at making it because they can't just take them from California. And so I went down to Colorado Springs with my barely matching knee pads, and the coaches said, you're not a great volleyball player, but you're a pretty good athlete. And so I followed the San Diego State at the time head assistant coach down the runway at concourse at Denver Airport and said, can I walk on? And she said, sure. So I gave up. I have very amazing parents who said, if that's what you want to do, go for it. Gave up the full ride and went and walked on at San Diego State. And they immediately redshirted me, where they said, yeah, we need to teach you how to play volleyball. But over the course of having never gone to the school, having never spoken to the coach, probably, I don't even remember, having never even looked into really what I wanted to do, I kind of blindly showed up there. And shocker, didn't have a great experience. And so about 2 years into it, my dad's like, you're calling home crying a lot. You're having a miserable experience. He doesn't value you. Why are you staying? You need to go finish your education. You're not going to be able to play professional anything. So my older sister had gone to University of Virginia. She's like, you should come to Virginia. I love it. Oh, and there's this little school down south called William and Mary. Maybe you want to look into that. So I put together my VHS tape, and I typed up a letter, and I put it in the mail. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call. This is Deb on my answering machine. This is Debbie Hill from the William and Mary Volleyball Program, and you need to come to William and Mary. And I look back on it and I say, it was such a blessing. I had such a tremendous opportunity at San Diego State to play with top 10 girls in the country. And then I got to go to an amazing academic university, and we were also top 25 in the country. So it was great volleyball, but also all the women in my class were valedictorian or salutatorian of their class. They've all gone on to like be in the Peace Corps and work, professors at Georgetown and open heart surgeons. And so surrounding yourself with talent and peak performers was just such a gift. And then from there, with my Japanese degree, Hajime Mashite Dozu Yoroshiku, I had studied in Japan one of my summers, and being 6 feet tall and blonde, if you can't see me, it was not going to work out very well to live in Japan. And so I did what every person does and moved to Eastern Europe, which my parents loved. So I was in Budapest, Hungary with my twin sister and older sister for about a year and a half, trying to figure out what to do with my life, and ran into a very tall, athletic guy who was playing pro basketball over there from Eugene, Oregon. We got together and said, what do you want to do? He's like, well, I'm from Eugene. I want to work for Nike. I said, great, me too. So we found out that they had an office in Vienna, Austria. I jumped on a train, showed up on their doorstep, and started working for Nike in 1995 in Vienna, Austria, and lived in Europe for 10 years, Vienna, Stockholm, Amsterdam, and Budapest, and then got married along the way and had 15 years at Nike, which was awesome, both in Europe and then eventually at world headquarters.
Wow. It's always great to hear the stories and the paths that people take. I want to go back to your college experience, but before we do that, you mentioned you're 6 foot, your basketball, your volleyball. What was that ballet experience like?
Right. Well, at least when I was doing that, I wasn't that tall, but my mom was fairly tall for her generation. And what she said was, she goes, I knew you were going to be tall, so I wanted you to carry yourself well. She didn't want you to be like slouched over and have bad posture. She goes, it wasn't about, again, becoming a prima ballerina, although my oldest sister loved ballet. She would go to the lessons, and my twin sister and I would like sneak into the bathroom and try to hide. But again, those core experiences, and now that's what I tell parents too, take piano, take ballet, take gymnastics. I mean, I had my daughter who's also fairly tall do gymnastics. It's core strength. It's using your brain in different ways. And we're so focused on the outcome now. Oh, but what does that mean 20 years? Who cares? Like, right. It's giving them flexibility and core strength and all of these skills that are going to lead them, help them much further down the road.
Right. That whole multi-sport experience that athletic directors should be emphasizing. I want to look at that transitional period from San Diego State to William and Mary. I ask this question a lot. Looking back at that time, and I know from some of your social media posts, you had a very special time at William and Mary. Was there an event? Were there events at William and Mary for you as a student athlete that maybe at the time didn't stick out that much, but now looking back with perspective, you can say, hey, that was an important moment. Anything stick out for you like that?
Yeah, such a good question. Yeah, I mean, again, you're in the middle of it. Back then, right, you called home every other Sunday from the hall payphone, and you gave your parents the highlights of whatever probably was going on in that moment. I mean, they came to watch me play a little bit, but it wasn't about that. I honestly can't tell you that. I remember 2 matches that I played in those 2 years that I was at William & Mary. One was to play against San Diego State because I wanted to beat them so bad. And we almost did. We took them to 5. And I got to play against my best friend, and I totally clamped her. We still joke about it. But then more importantly than the stats, I remember the bus rides. I remember that bus driver. I just saw him 2 weeks ago. He came to hear me speak. He was like a part of the family. And that coach too, like, she valued each woman individually, not because of their skill set, but because of who they were. And that's what I hear a lot from athletes now, is they feel like, they are their stats. They aren't an individual who also has other interests. And so I think the biggest thing that stood out for me was how special I felt, even among a bunch of amazing, again, super talented academically and athletically humans. It was just fun to be a part of an environment that encouraged you to shine as bright as you possibly could, and you weren't going to get penalized for that.
Wow. I'm going to go back and write that down later from the transcript. That's something every athletic director, every coach should have. Absolutely. Great stuff. For our listeners, our guest today is Kirsten Jones. She's got an incredible athletic background, but right now she's a sports parenting coach, also a very successful author, Raising Empowered Athletes. We're going to talk more about the book, but let's take that first break. We're going to be back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support of the podcast. Gipper is the official social media graphics solution for us. And if you go to Gipper.com, their team is going to help you create world-class marketing content for your school's social media channel. If you're not on social media, promoting your program, celebrating your teams and athletes, you're really missing out. Gipper is so easy to use, even I can use it. It's used and trusted by over 3,000 high school and college athletic programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made simple. Go to Gipper.com, mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Once again, our guest is Kirsten Jones. She's a sports parenting coach. She's an author. She's a podcaster. And we're excited to have her here on our podcast. Kirsten, you kind of took us up through, your college days, and, you met your husband internationally, started working for Nike. What were some of the things that you were doing, and, what got you back into the United States at Nike headquarters?
Yeah, so I joined in 1995 when Nike just had distributors in Eastern Europe. And my first job was, at the time, Nike was collecting old shoes and regrinding them and making courts, basketball courts out of them. So my first project was to build a reuse a shoe court in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, Slovenia. And we brought Scottie Pippen over to be the opening guest for that. So it started in sports marketing and doing things like that. I got to go to Moscow and stand on the ice. Nike and Bauer Hockey had combined, and ESPN did a segment on Nike donating used hockey equipment to the young kids in Moscow. So I can't find it. I used to have this great picture of me standing with the Russian Red Army at 24 years old in Moscow and going out onto the ice in front of, they said, 200 million people, because it was being broadcast throughout the CIS. Kirsten Jones would like to, on behalf of Nike, donate these used hockey equipment. And that ESPN crew was with me for 3 days. I mean, pinch me. Are you kidding me? Like, it was so cool. But yes, eventually ended up marrying that tall man. And we've been together ever since and had 3 kids. And our oldest was born in Amsterdam. I moved into footwear. So I was a merchandiser, headed up kids footwear, and then worked in the buying team for the Nike Towns, London and Berlin, that we had 2 of them over there. And then when I got back to world headquarters, one of the most respected gentlemen, kind of one of the forefathers of Nike, came to me and he said, I would love to teach our executives, kind of do an internal MBA. I've been here so long and I get questions all the time about merchandising. So I got to collaborate with this great guy, Ron Hill, and we created a course called Product Creation University. And I was in charge of the content and in charge of the delivery and in charge of storytelling and weaving all the learning together. And I think that's where I started to get these ideas and see people have these eye-opening moments where the penny dropped, where they realized, oh, I see how this works. And that was when I think that the seedlings for what I'm doing now started happening, because I actually grew up hating public speaking and, of course, being mortified. They say death, taxes, and public speaking are what people fear the most. Yet the more you do it and the more you have fun with it, and then being in a place like Nike, storytelling is king. So it was always really fun to try out new stories every class I had. And yeah, once I left in 2008, I took a few years off. I had young kids, 8, 5, and 3 at the time. We were following my husband's career. He's in marketing. He was on the brand side. He worked with Kobe and LeBron and did basketball for a few years. And then he ended up staying on the brand side and working for DC Shoes, which was what brought us to San Diego. And ultimately, right now, he's at Fender Guitar. He's the head of marketing for Fender.
Wow.
So he stayed on that side. I've been on the the motivational side. So a couple of years after that, I went to Tony Robbins and got certified through that. And then I started thinking, okay, when you get pregnant, everyone hands you what to expect when you're expecting, and you're like, the best book ever. I am going to be the best parent ever. Like, you read every chapter, you know what size it is, and you feel really in control of being a good parent. And then like 4 years later, you get to kick and chase, and there's some yahoo on the sideline standing next to you going, "We're not doing this rec thing, are you? Like, you're going to go do club. Like, we have a private coach. Our 8-year-old's going to Stockholm this summer. Like, you're not going to just play rec." And here I was, having played D1 volleyball, having worked for Nike for 15 years with some of the most elite athletes. And I was standing on the sidelines with FOMO. And I was like, where's the book? Where do I find the answers? Is this normal? And the answer, parents and ADs, is no. This is a $20 billion business. It's larger than the NFL. And it's happened because over time, back in the 50s and 60s, only 40 or 24% of women worked outside of the home. By the 70s and 80s, that number doubled. Now we have more money, we have less time. Oh, by the way, a report comes out that's saying our kids are falling behind academically. In 1979, Adam Walsh gets abducted and decapitated, and 38 million people tune in to find out that the world is a scary place. We cannot allow our kids to go outside in the street and play anymore. So what happens when we have all this? Oh, and by the way, ESPN comes online about the same time, right? So now I can turn on my TV and I can see, Andre Agassi or Wayne Gretzky or Tiger Woods, and what is it, 10,000 hour rule? And if I too, spend 10,000 hours, I too can create a prodigy. I don't think there was a single moment, but it was this perfect kind of combination of all of these things that led into the late 80s, early 90s, and now the last 30 years of it being this crazy, and I get it. There is not a single parent out there that is like, I'm going to screw up my kid. Of course not. They're all doing the best they can from where they are. But I think what starts with daddy ball being good intention, a couple guys are going to get together and coach their kids, turns into, well, what if we got Johnny? Well, what if we got Timmy? Well, what if we got Scott? We could be better. Oh, what if we got better? Then we could win. And then we win, then we could. And it started to grow and escalate. And then other people go, gosh, these parents seem to really care about this. I'm going to charge, $150 an hour. And again, I was with a parent in Dallas this weekend who she said her husband was paying $150 for the 5-year-old to have individual training because he was worried that he was behind already. I mean, it's nuts. And it's not healthy for anybody, mostly the kids, but it's not healthy for the parents either. So that's where I got to, where this point with the book, and it took me 7 years to write it because I'm living it too. I'm raising 3 kids and I'm feeling a lot of these things and going through a lot of this. No, my kids weren't prodigies. No, we weren't the best on every team. Yes, I had kids get cut. Yes, I had kids that didn't get playing time, got on the bench and never got off, who got injured, who, like all of those lessons. But those are the life lessons. Take out athlete, put in artist. Take out athlete, put in mathlete. Like, it's not about the athletics. It's about raising gritty, resilient, kind, caring humans long after the ball stops bouncing. Like, we know it's going to stop for everyone. Even LeBron's going to have to hang it up here in a year or so. So we have to look at it less about the trophy, less about, less, and speaking to the choir here, less than 5% will play D1, D2, D3, NAIA. If it's about the scholarship, here in LA, if I told you there's a 2% chance, or Florida, there's a 2% chance of rain, are you taking an umbrella? No. But that's what parents are doing at 3 when they have some coach tell them their kid has potential. Oh, we're all in. No more vacations. No more, we're only going to be doing this.
Yeah. Boy, you were on a roll there. I wasn't going to interrupt you. And for our listeners, again, you really need to go out and get the book. We'll tell you how to get it later on. We're not going to read the book to you today. We want you to go out and buy it, but it's called Raising Empowered Athletes. And I'm glad you mentioned that it took you 7 years to do this. The book is not just some ramblings of you mentioned, some nutty parent on the sidelines. This is someone with some athletic chops of her own, but very exhaustively researched. Okay. It's a really great reference. And any athletic director listening right now, what Kirsten is talking about, these parents and these quote coaches that are infecting or have infected the profession, the real profession of coaching. We're going to take a quick break, but we are going to be coming back with more. Again, our guest today is Kirsten Jones. The name of the book, Raising Empowered Athletes. We're going to take a deep dive in our next couple segments into the book. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Huddle for their support. Go to huddle.com. Change the way that you see the game. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed them to help coach our kids up to their highest level. At Huddle, we believe in sports and teams believe in Huddle. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. That's huddle.com. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Kirsten, you really did a great job of kind of explaining your motivation and, those moments for, deciding, hey, I got to put something together. Take us further into that journey. How did it all play out? You mentioned 7 years. Obviously, it's not an overnight thing, but, how did it all end up coming together after you got the motivation to do it?
So when I speak with parents, I think part of the message is in the book, and particularly to younger parents, it's obviously the context of the book. But I'm 53, soon to be 54. And I think another life lesson that I want to model to my kids, and I think, again, we may pick a career at 15 or 18 or 25. And then at a certain point, we may decide this isn't for us anymore. And while I had a wonderful run at Nike, what was fun for me about this journey was reinventing myself. And I'd never been an entrepreneur before. I'd never done anything like this before. So while I'm helping my kids grow, I also went down the path of learning more myself. And my joke, not joke, is we moved to LA 8 years ago, and 3 kids, 3 different schools, 1 grade school, 1 high school, 1 middle school, 0 buses. So I spent a lot of time in my car. So I feel like I got my MBA, maybe even PhD, by listening to podcasts and audibles. And I think that's where a lot of these ideas started, because I would be listening to things that would be inspiring me. And then I started writing ideas down. I think I wrote by myself for like 2 years before I kept, wondering, does it matter? Who am I to write this? All of those questions. So it took me on my own journey of realizing my own worth, and then saying, no, I do have a point of view on all of this. So then I hired a book coach, because I've never written a book. So why should I know how to write a book? Yet I assume that I should know how to write a book. And here I am telling people they should hire me, but yet I'm not getting coaching. I was like, oh, okay. So I hired a book coach, and ultimately she's a lovely woman. And she just wanted to redline everything that I wrote. Yeah, that's a run on and that's a type. And I'm like, ugh. Every time she'd send me an email, I would like flinch. And what I realized was I didn't need an editor. I needed a partner. I'm a team sports girl, and I love hitting the ball back and forth. And so I ended up finding this amazing man who lives in Eugene, Oregon, who's written 25 of his own books, Bob Welch, and he's also a sports editor. He was a sports editor for the Eugene paper. So he knew sports. He was an athlete. He was in the middle of hiking the Pacific Coast Trail. He's a father and a grandfather. And so I had the scaffolding of my book. I had the ideas and the big pieces that I knew where I wanted it to go. And then he helped me. I would send him a chapter, and he would like, hey kid, you're burying the lead. Let's bring this back up top. And he would help me shape it. They're my ideas. They're my stories. They're my words. But he helped, give context and punctuation to the ideas that I wanted to bring forward. So he made it a very enjoyable experience. And then I had to shop for, he self-publishes most of his stuff, and I really wanted to get a publisher. Just had it in my mind. That's what I wanted to do. So I think I sent it out to over 50 agents and got crickets, literally nobody. And then through a friend at Nike who had written a book, she's like, you should try my guy. And I call Tim in Chicago, and he reads through it and he's like, yes, you have a platform. Yes, you're a speaker. Yes, you have this educational background. Yes, yes, yeah. And I kept waiting for the no. And he's like, no, you're great. So he helped me tighten my 70-page proposal. And within 2 months, we started pitching it. And within a month, I had 2 offers. Triumph Books is who my publisher is. They mostly do like the Texas Ranger, Coffee Table, World, Series Champs book will be coming out. They do those kind of books. But about 10, 15 years ago, they did a book by Jenny Finch called Throw Like a Girl. And that has been their best-selling book, maybe ever. I don't know. But when I jumped on a Zoom with them, they were like, you remind us of Jenny. This topic is not going away. It's evergreen. And that's what we think we need. And so we have parents that reach out, they're pissed off, they're whatever, mad and angry, and they want to let everybody know how crazy this is. Like, we don't need that. We need some solutions. So the goal of the book is, again, I believe we teach what we need to learn. And yes, I didn't do it perfectly. I'm not a sage from the stage. I'm a guide from the side. I'm going through it too. And I want to help others who are trying to be, again, when we know better, we do better. And so it's hopefully there's nuggets in there where, the one story, the dad hired a skywriter to fly the plane across his son's baseball field. Not because the team was sucking. In fact, they're 18-2. Not because the parents didn't like the coaches. In fact, the parents loved the coaches. Yet the sign said, fire Coach Smith and Coach Kowalczyk. Why? Because his son wasn't getting playing time. And if you can look at that and say, okay, I would never do that. But what are you doing on the sidelines? Even cheering against the other team, even, again, berating your own child or talking poorly about another child or a coach or a ref in the car ride home. The only 6 words our kids need to hear are, I love to watch you play. That's it. All of this, us putting our own ego in, well, and back in my day, and, allowing our agenda to become the agenda. They just want to make us happy. They just want to know they're enough. Get out of their way. And ADs, I know you have the hardest job because you have to deal with those parents who are all sure their kids are going D1. And you're the one person standing in the way of that.
Well, I actually used that anecdote about the plane with the banner at a recent coaches meeting I was at.
Good.
Kind of like, hey, I just heard about this story. And again, your book is so well constructed, so well organized, a lot of anecdotes, but you touched on that word solutions. We've heard the complaints. Okay, what are some things that we can do? And for AEDs, it's got some information that you could take and share with your parents, in a positive, nurturing, helping way, as we like to say, partnering with parents. But it's also got some stuff for you as a leader that you can begin doing. We're going to take that deeper dive into our next segment. But before we take that break, you mentioned earlier, Andre Agassi, and you got a great quote about Agassi's dad, looking back. Can you share that with our listeners before we break?
Yeah, so Andre, of course, has had the ping pong paddle tied to his hand in the crib. That's how sure his dad was he was creating a prodigy, and built the tennis court by hand himself and had him out there fighting the green monster, hitting 1,000 balls a day, shipping him off to Nick Bollettieri to ensure that he was going to become this prodigy. And at the end of it all, and the 250 plus million and all the deals and everything, and the dad, do you have any regrets? The answer was, well, just one. And what's that? Well, we should have gone after golf because you could have made a lot more money and you could have played a lot longer.
Yeah. Again, and we know, you and I, we can chuckle at that because we know parents, like that. And maybe there's a little bit of that in us too, but it's a great book. Let's go ahead and give out the information. Where can they find the book? Again, the name of the book, Raising Empowered Athletes, the author, Kirsten Jones. Where can they find it? And where can they find the podcast? And how can they connect with you?
So the book's available everywhere books are sold. If you want it today in your hands, you can go on to Amazon. That's definitely the quickest way to get it, but it is on every.com that you can imagine. My website is called KirstenJonesInc.com. My podcast is hosted on there. You can find it on Spotify or iTunes, but hashtag Raising Athletes is the name of the podcast. And then if you sign up for my newsletter, which I would love if you follow along, weekly I'm doing updates on there about places I'm speaking, about parenting tips and topics, and I do have a whole chapter in there on coaching. And again, I think this book is for everybody. This isn't just for parents, and it's not just for athletes. It's for all sides, because I do believe we need to partner. We all need to hold hands in order to make this a better situation for the kids.
No, absolutely. And again, we'll give out that information at the end of the podcast. But Kirsten Jones is the author and our guest, and the book is Raising Empowered Athletes. We're going to take another break, but we're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support. Go to their website, vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check out their interactive touchscreen, that's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's a great way to show off your school record boards for all the teams, for all the sports, or your school's Hall of Fame, or simply tell about your school's diverse history and your proudest moments. The website's vitalsignswalloffame.com. Let them help you bring your school's legacy to life. Mention the podcast, guess what? They'll give you a nice discount. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Home Campus for their support. Home Campus is the exclusive high school and state association information management platform for us. It's also your one-stop platform for things like schedules, student athlete eligibility and clearance, helping parents upload forms themselves, and a whole lot more. As an athletic director, I used Home Campus every single day, and it was just fantastic. And their staff is great to work with too. To get signed up, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's homecampus.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. We're visiting today with Kirsten Jones, speaker, podcaster, sports parenting coach, and the author of a great book, Raising Empowered Athletes. Kirsten, there were several passages. I had a hard time narrowing down ones that I wanted to talk about, but this one really stuck out for me. You share in the book very candidly about a bullying incident that occurred to you, when you were a freshman. I'm going to let you tell the story, but here's where I'm going with it. It's I'm a little bit older than you now, that I realize. And we like to think in 2023 that bullying doesn't exist anymore, but it does. It's out there. And coaches and ADs and parents, we struggle to try to, make sure it doesn't happen, but also help our kids be strong enough to handle those situations. Share, if you can, that moment in your life, and maybe share what are some things, and I know you outline them in the book, but what are some things that we can do with our student athletes, that parents and coaches and athletic directors can do to make sure our kids are ready to deal with it when it happens? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's growing. It's become an epidemic of kids having overwhelm and anxiety, and there's a bunch of different things that are going on to cause all of this tumultuous, environment for the kids. But one thing that, again, has been there, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, but in 1984, I was a freshman in high school in a small town. So, maybe that was part of it, but I was a very good basketball player. And I was the only freshman on the varsity team. And the juniors and seniors didn't like it. And they let me know right from the very beginning. And when I would walk into school in the morning, they would spit on me. They would stand on the balcony above and spit on me. They would come up and steal the ball from me and call me names during practice. They would cut my car tires, slice the car tires. And then they'd run to the coach and tell on me and say, what a horrible person I was. So when I went to quit, The one day it escalated because they wanted me to bring food for the whole team for the bus ride. It'd be one thing if it was like freshmen are bringing food, but it was an individual thing where it was clearly I was being targeted. And I went to the coach and said, I'm done here. And he said, no, don't quit. He goes, don't worry, when you're their age, you can do that too. And it was in that moment that I said, I will never treat another human being the way I've just been treated, and many more details that you don't need to know, but to know that I never told my parents. And also now going back, I don't know why. I was very close to my parents, but I was a teenager. So I guess I must have felt like everybody went through this, and I don't know what they were going to do about it. So I just kind of bit my lip. In fact, they didn't find out till many, many years later. But I ended up transferring into the bigger city, into Missoula, and going to one of the largest high schools, in the city. And we won the state championship in basketball, went 32-1 my second year, and then won 3 state volleyball titles together. And there were a couple of young girls on that team. And every single time there was somebody younger than me, I was the first one to say, come on, we've got this. We're going to do this together. And again, while it was horrific and horrible, and again, you may be in a situation where you're seeing that happening in your school or experiencing it as a parent, but I'd like to say I share it with hope in that for me, it became a moment in time that I think it's part of my why. I do what I do now because of the bad thing happening to me. And I'm not wishing it on anybody, but when we can take time and teach from the scar, not the wound, you can't do it when you're in the middle of it, but when it's scarred over for a while, you can say, wow, I realize what an impact that had on me. And I realize what being a positive impact on others can do to help others. So yes, talking about the suicide rate, particularly in college athletes. And when you look at some of these athletes who, have it all, they're at the top school, getting the best grades, winning the national championship. And we say, why? Why would they be suicidal? And what we're seeing is the rates of depression and anxiety are escalating because they feel like so much is outside of their own capabilities. I'll be happy when I get into the school, when I get this title. I'll be happy when I get that job. It's not about anything they're doing internally. It's all external things. So to your question, what can we do? It's empowering them. It's an inside job. And they've got to believe in themselves. And it's things like giving them roles and responsibility and autonomy in the home around, well, kids don't make their beds anymore. They don't have time to babysit. They don't have time for a job. They don't have time to do chores, right? Because we're so busy. But what that's doing is robbing them of self-worth. Making your bed first thing in the morning, now you've done one thing good. You texted me this morning at 5:30. I was getting up to make my bed, to get my day going, because what we know is how we start the day. And I've got a whole chapter on mindset and on toolbox. Like that's the secret sauce in my book. In my mind, if you read only one book, one chapter, that's the chapter that I work with the athletes and the parents on every day, because those are the tools that they'll take, again, long after sports. But when you get the job, when you're in the relationship, when you're, working for someone else, how are you going to treat them? How are you going to be treated? And it's those tools around affirmation and mantras and journaling, writing down, goal setting. How are you speaking to yourself about what's possible? And I think I had it just naturally, but I always had these really big dreams. Like I wanted to play on the women's national volleyball team. And I grew up in Montana. Like, it's kind of absurd. Like we barely played volleyball. And of course, I never made it to the national team, but I made it to Nike, which is pretty freaking cool. And I like to think that it was because I got very clear on what I wanted. And that's why I've lived as many places that I lived. And I continue to articulate when I talk with kids, like be as specific as possible. Don't tell me, well, I want to, and it has to be something within your control. Not I want to be the MVP, not I want to get this trophy, but what I want to write a book. It took me 7 years. Who cares? If it's important to you, you will show up every day. If you write 500 words a day, if you write 20 words a day, eventually you will get there. And for those of you who are parents, and again, as administrators, modeling that. What are you modeling? wow, I made a mistake today. Wow, we shouldn't have played in that tournament. Whatever you're going through, to be able to give kids permission to make mistakes. Right now, we live in this perfectionist society where you got to do this perfect and this perfect. You got perfect scores. You got to. No, you don't. We want you to be creative. We want you to be curious. And the only way we learn is by making errors. There's a great new book out called Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. He's written several, obviously, but this one, he talks about being a diver, and it resonates because of sports. And he said, I stood on the first day of diving my freshman year of high school, I stood on the high dive for 45 minutes before I jumped off even once. He says, what a waste. But I was a perfectionist. I need to do it perfect. I want to know exactly what I'm supposed to do. I need to know exactly where the target is. He goes, I could have done 20 dives and gotten this much better, but I chose to stand there and not improve at all. So that's a lot of what I work with, again, and what I want the kids and the parents to know. We're not perfect. There is no human being that is perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. And in fact, I highly encourage you to make them visible so that your kids can see you struggling and being like, okay, wow, what's your feedback for me? And getting that feedback so you can get better.
Boy, you probably saw me scribbling some things down. We're going to go and take a break, but you're absolutely right. And parents, it just seems to be where we've gotten. In their good intentions, they want to remove any chance of failure, any obstacle from their child's path, thinking that they're going to save them. When, as you know, that's how we get better, by overcoming those failures, if you will, getting back, falling down and getting back up. And that's where the coach comes in. So we're going to go into that a little bit more because it's very important. Let's go and take that break. Once again, for our listeners, if you haven't been paying attention, our guest is Kirsten Jones. She's a speaker. She's an author. The book, we'll give out that information again, is Raising Empowered Athletes. So let's take that break, but we're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and scoreboards, for their support. Go to their website, sidelineinteractive.com, and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their scoreboards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Of course, we use it for home games, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. We also want to thank Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. If you go to hometownticketing.com, their team will show you how to set up and sell tickets online, not just for your athletic events, but for things like school plays, concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to say thanks to Snap Mobile. Go to their site, snapraise.com. That's snapraise.com. Check out their platforms. SnapRaise is the fundraising platform. And if you've ever spent time with a fundraiser, days and weeks, with little, if any, return on your time, you really need to check out SnapRaise. Hands down, the best online fundraising platform. We used it at our school with great success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. Our finance officer loved it. And the bottom line, it works. They even have a program where they will give you your funding before you actually start your fundraiser. Nobody else does that. Go to snapraise.com to get started and check out their other platforms like Snap Store, Snap Manage, and Snap Connect. Snapraise.com.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Educational AD Podcast. Kirsten, you opened up the door. You talked about if you're only going to read one chapter, this is the one I want you to read. And you talk about tools, and we certainly have our toolbox here on the podcast. But what are a couple of the tools maybe that you haven't mentioned today, or ones that you want to, hit harder for our listeners, athletic directors, tools that they can use or tools that they can pass on to parents, along with, hey, go out and buy the book.
Right. Let's start there. Yeah. So the toolbox is, again, when I work with teams, I go in and work with the team for an entire season. We set goals. We go from soup to nuts. And I like when working at Nike, it was a team performance model, the Drexler Cibbett performance model that we would work with. And for some reason, the analogy that works well for me is it's like flying the plane. So when we get on board, there's forming, storming, norming, and then performing. And any great team, in order to perform when it matters, i.e. the playoffs, we got to go through the other steps. So forming, if there's even one new member on that team, it's a brand new team. We've got to reset, go back to step one. So forming, storming is that time where who's flying the plane, who's handing out drinks, where are you sitting, what's your role? And again, every team is different, and there are kids that'll come in where they're sure they're going to be the star. And, if they went from freshman to JV and they're no longer the star, and they're going to have to sit in a different seat. And then norming is, okay, we're third way through the season. We've hit some bumps and some headwinds and turbulence early. Now we've got to figure out the best flying formation so that we can be performing at the time when it matters. And I love seeing teams performing when it matters. In fact, I'm working with a college team, the William and Mary field hockey team. I've been working with them just the last 3 weeks. They just made it to the NC2As. They beat the #1 seed. They were the #5 seed after talking with me. So I'm like, yes. And now they're going to go dance. And that's what peak performance is. So I won't go into all of that, but there's 4 things that I dive into: clarity of vision, care, which self-care, how do you define that? Contribution and creation. So clarity, self-care, contribution, and creation are really the 4 big buckets that I look at when I'm working with an individual or working with teams. And when we have time, we dive down into each of those to help flesh out what's going on. One of the ones I think that's the most important, and that's what I'll touch on right now, is number 3. You want the other ones? Buy the book. But number 3 is contribution. And again, back to what I touched on in the last segment, but kids aren't feeling valued. They aren't feeling like they get a chance to contribute in a meaningful way, because who has time? You got to go to school and you got practice. And during COVID, I saw a huge dive. The statistics I read was that 70% of kids were pivoting away from sports altogether. And I think they were losing a sense of who they were because they weren't a part of something anymore. So I challenged my son. We had a little next door neighbor who was 7 years old, who would peek through the fence to watch my high schooler shoot baskets. And I said, you need to be coaching him. And again, he made a little extra money. He's like, wow, Mom, I never even thought about how I do a layup. Now I had to teach him how to do the layup. This kid would come over. You would have thought that Kawhi Leonard was living next door, right? He was having the most, gobsmack moment, right? And P.S., we moved and we've got another one that shows up on the doorstep now. Like giving back. And again, it can be minutes a week. It doesn't have to be every day, but it does 2 things. It helps, obviously, the receiver, but more importantly, it helps the giver. Our endorphins go crazy when we get that beautiful bath of, I'm enough. And when your kids are feeling overwhelmed and they're feeling shut down, I got an athlete I'm working with right now who throws up before every soccer game. I'm like, grow up. Why are you throwing up? She goes, well, I don't know. But when my dad texts me during my soccer game, excuse me, texts you during your soccer game? How does that work? Well, I go to the sideline for water, and my dad's like giving me the sign that I need to look at my phone. So I pretend like I'm getting water out of my bag to pick up my phone. And I said, and what does the phone say? It says, why did I even bother coming today? I mean, this is breaking my heart. Like, she's a kid who loves soccer, who loves to be out there, who wants to play Division I, who's getting recruited to play Division I. And yet the message she's getting is she's not enough. And the parents are calling me because they're confused as to why she's hyperventilating and she's having panic attacks, right? Oh my goodness. So helping those athletes, that's what I'm focused on, and helping the parents. I did hand the book to dad. Like, we need to be doing things that will help build their inner sense of self as well.
Boy, it's so it's so sad when you hear those types of stories. You mentioned the William and Mary field hockey team. And obviously, there's a lot of things that went into your work with them. What's one thing, what's an outcome that you've noticed that maybe kind of surprised you, that you maybe hadn't focused on that or weren't expecting that? Anything come to mind?
I don't know. It surprised me, but it validated what I know about peak performers, which was I barely had to, I just chummed the water. Like, I didn't even have to do that much, or in my opinion, I didn't do that much, but they were peak performers. And that's what parents and coaches, the kids are so hungry for it. Like, they just sit there and ask for more, 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 more. And so they're all like glued to everything you have to say. Like, those are the ones that are going to go on and play at a higher level. And again, I coached 9 and 10-year-old girls, and there's always one like doing TikTok dances, and that's fine. They're 9. Like, let them. Parents are like, what are they doing the TikTok dance? Let them do the TikTok dance. It's probably not their thing, or not yet. But these D1 athletes who are great students, who are super focused, I gave them permission to not be so hard on themselves, because I think, again, that's what the coach is like. They're all straight A students. They're all super intense. They're all in their heads about it. It has to be perfect. And so my message to them was, be a goldfish, right? Like, you make a mistake, 5 seconds later, it's behind you. And don't be focused. Well, yeah, and then she didn't pass me the right way, and then I made an error. You've already missed the next opportunity. It's gone by you. And so giving yourself permission to do that, and trusting not only yourself, but your teammates, that the best is in front of you. And they were like, we did that. That was so much fun. And they played in flow. And flow is when it is just outside your comfort zone and just outside of your capability. When those things happen, time either really slows down, which again I talk about in the book as well, and that comes to goal setting. But time either really slows down, like the Matrix, or really speeds up. Like, you don't even know like what happened. Oh my gosh, that went by so fast. But I talk about flow and how do we get into flow and all of that.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for sharing. And again, we're going to, one more time, we'll give out that information about the book. This has just been so much fun. Finally, sitting down with you and spending some time, but we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. And I love how you talk about tools. You're not an AD, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. So we're going to take our final break, hear from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this particular segment. When we come back, we're going to find out what Kirsten Jones is going to put into her new athletic director toolbox. Please stay with us. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic surveys are a quick, easy, and an affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that will allow you to help improve all aspects of your program. Athletic directors already hear back from the complainers, that group that want to gripe about everything. Well, athletic surveys will connect you with that group, but they'll also connect you with the 98% that support your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent or a student athlete, or even your principal or your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey for your school that lets you take the pulse of your parents and your student athletes. That's Athletic Surveys. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We have been visiting with Kirsten Jones, just an incredible background in athletics. She's a speaker, she's a coach, she's a podcast host herself. She's also the author of a very successful book, Raising Empowered Athletes. We'll tell you again how to get that. But right now, I'm going to challenge her to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let her put 3 things in their toolbox. So, Kirsten, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
First of all, I think you have the hardest job in high school athletics and high school, working with athletes, working with those parents who, again, I think 30, 40 years ago, I didn't even know who my AD was when I went to high school. And now that job has become so, you're so in the crosshairs. So I so admire what you do. I will take from my corporate, my Nike mindset, which was when you would land in a new job, they would say, spend the first 90 days asking a lot of questions. So if you're brand new, get in there and assume nothing, and really ask the questions to help you seek to understand, not necessarily to be understood. And I think particularly early on in a job, but as you go throughout, the best leaders ask great open-ended questions, because that allows people to understand, get their point across and feel heard, which I think number two, so number one would be to ask great questions. Number two would be to validate what you heard. So seeking with a follow-up. So what you're saying is X, Y, or Z. You're not telling them you're going to fix it. I mean, even having worked I worked in Eastern Europe where English was their third, fourth, or fifth language. So you needed to spend a lot of time not promising them the river, the moon, but saying, what is it you're really asking me? So that you can be sure you're hearing it. And then third would be to collaborate. So what are those things that you actually do have control over? And again, don't promise them everything, or I'm sure that's where people say, well, I told them what I wanted and I haven't gotten it yet. So why have I not gotten the results that I want? But it's about us holding hands together. I have one bad AD in my mind through my kids, 3 kids experience, where literally he would start off the fall kickoff for sports parents. Do not talk to me, do not call me, and do not drink before you go to the games. And that was all he had to deliver. And we were like, wait, aren't you happy we're here? Aren't you excited? Right. And so, please don't be like him. Please be inviting. And again, to me, that's the role of the mayor. You're the mayor. You need to be, the more you know those kids and the more you know those parents. And again, not to be everybody's best friend. I'm not saying that, but just to be, you're the collaborator to help them on their journey. And maybe fourth would be to plug me and to say, buy the book, follow along at Kirsten Jones Inc. You can buy the book there. You can buy it on Amazon, and follow the podcast. Susie Walton and I, who I adore, Luke Walton's mom and, ex-wife of Bill Walton. And she experienced, raising 4 of her own athletes, and now is a wonderful parenting coach for the last 40 plus years. We give so many great examples around how can we fail fast forward and pick ourselves up and do it all over again.
Wow. Great stuff. I love the way you phrase that, about be inviting. I don't know how I would have responded in that meeting with that AD, don't call me, don't drink. Just great stuff. Once again, for our listeners, the book is, the author's Kirsten Jones. The book is Raising Empowered Athletes. You can find it on Amazon and any place books are sold. Go to the website. I'm going to butcher the website, so I'm going to let you say it again.
KirstenJonesInc.com. And on there, I have where I'm speaking next. And as he mentioned at the beginning, I've been all over the United States, and that's my passion. I mean, the book has been super fun. I know I'm not making $1 million on that. My passion is speaking, if you haven't gotten the drift from how I talk about all this stuff. But I'm going out and meeting with teams. I'm meeting with a middle school next month. I'm actually going back to Dallas to speak to a high school, and they're sending it out to all their feeder schools. So if you think it might be a fit, I would love and welcome the opportunity. We can either do it via Zoom or I can do it in person. But I think this is a message that, again, all parents, and if we partner together, we can make this a much more enjoyable experience for our kids, memorable experience for our kids, and more memorable for us in a positive way.
Right. And athletic directors, Kirsten mentioned, if we partner together, partnering with parents, that's the name of the NIAAA's course, which I happen to be one of the authors for that course. So absolutely, you should reach out and talk to Kirsten about coming to your school, talking to your coaches, talking to your kids, and oh, by the way, talking with your parents. Kirsten Jones, thanks so much again for spending time with us, and all the best moving forward.
Thank you, Jake, for having me. It was wonderful to be a part of this.
Oh, right back at you. It's a lot of fun. For listeners, we do this just about every day, and we upload the Zoom recordings to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. Of course, we appreciate you listening. Come back next time for another great interview just about every day on the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.